Romance is dead, and these people buried it in the backyard. We've scraped the bottom of the barrel to bring you 49 of the most disastrous, cringe-inducing, and legally questionable first dates in American history. From kidnapping garden gnomes to literal plaster casts, if you think being single is bad, wait until you see the alternative. Your worst date is about to look like a Disney fairy tale. 1. In New Mexico, a woman's romantic evening took a sharp turn into horror movie territory when her date slapped a bucket of wet plaster on the table. He didn't want to hold her hand. He wanted to encase it in a permanent mold right there between the breadsticks and the salad. He didn't even ask first. Just imagine sitting there, trapped in cold, gray goop, while he stares at you with artistic intensity. Buddy, this isn't the movie Ghost. It's a prelude to a kidnapping. If a guy tries to turn you into a living room statue on the first date, run before the plaster sets. 2. Let's talk about the absolute rock bottom of social etiquette. You're at a nice Italian restaurant, trying to enjoy some fettuccine, when the man across from you decides to get comfortable. Too comfortable. He takes off his shoe, props his bare, hairy foot up on the empty chair, and whips out a pair of clippers. Snap. 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 He is literally clipping his toenails at the dinner table. I don't care how good the garlic knots are. The moment a piece of someone's foot becomes a projectile weapon near my food, the date is over. That's not being relaxed. That is a biological hazard. 3. There is nothing wrong with being a collector, but keep it in the basement until at least the third date. This guy unzipped his backpack at the table with the seriousness of a bomb squad technician and set up 3 vintage Star Wars action figures. He positioned them facing the woman and explained they were there to watch over us. Suddenly, it wasn't a romantic dinner. It was a performance review conducted by a tiny plastic Yoda. If you need a chaperone committee made of toys from 1980 to get through a conversation, you are definitely not ready for an adult relationship. 4. The male ego is a dangerous thing, especially when combined with street furniture. Trying to impress his date with a burst of athleticism, a guy shouted the famous last words, "Watch this," and attempted to hurdle a fire hydrant. Spoiler alert, the hydrant won. He didn't clear it, he smashed into it with the grace of a sack of potatoes. The night didn't end with a romantic kiss. It ended with paramedics asking him if he knew what year it was while he bled on the concrete. Nothing says marriage material quite like giving yourself a concussion because you picked a fight with municipal plumbing. 5. There is being thrifty, and then there is treating a first date like an episode of Survivor. This charmer told his date he wanted to make an anti-consumerist statement. He led her behind a gourmet grocery store to a dumpster and called it urban foraging. Most sane people call it digging through trash. He was genuinely trying to impress her with a bruised peach he found next to a discard pile. Look, fighting capitalism is great, but taking a woman to a garbage can for dinner isn't a revolution. It's just a really good way to get raccoons and tetanus involved in your love life. 6. We all love a good movie reference, but this guy turned it into a psychological torture method. For 2 entire hours, he refused to speak a single original thought. He only communicated using famous film quotes. You ask him about his job? I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. You ask if he wants dessert? Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn. It was charming for about 30 seconds. Then it became a conversational hostage situation. How do you break up with a guy like that? You probably just have to look him in the eye, say, "Hasta la vista, baby," and leave him with the bill. 7. Some people have strong opinions, but a man in Kentucky decided to die on the strangest hill imaginable. His date found him in the movie theater bathroom, engaged in a screaming match with the janitor. The topic of this heated debate? The correct orientation of the toilet paper roll. Over or under? He was red-faced, veins popping, ready to throw hands over tissue logistics. If you are getting into a fistfight about 2-ply positioning on a first date, you need therapy, not a girlfriend. Needless to say, she left him there to fight his holy war alone. 8. Picture the scene. A high-end restaurant, candlelight, soft music. The guy walks in wearing a sharp tuxedo jacket, looking like he just stepped out of a Bond movie. He sits down, looks debonair, and then he crosses his legs. Boom, bright yellow Crocs with dress socks. It was business on top, kindergarten recess on the bottom. He wasn't doing it for a laugh. He genuinely thought it was a valid stylistic choice. It takes a lot of charisma to overcome the visual of a tuxedo paired with rubber gardening shoes. And let me tell you, this guy did not have it. That's not a fashion statement, it's a cry for help. 9. Picture this scenario. You are mid-sentence, sharing a charming anecdote when your date whips out his phone. He isn't checking a text or glancing at the time. He is literally inviting his mother to the restaurant to meet the new girl immediately. 10 minutes later, mom walks in and pulls up a chair. That isn't a date anymore, my friends. That is a surprise parental ambush, and you are the primary suspect in a lineup. If a man needs his mother's approval before the appetizers even arrive, you aren't looking for a relationship. You're looking for an adoption agency. 10. A dinner date in Chicago seemed like it was going perfectly, right until the check arrived. That was the signal for this guy to pull a full set of Tupperware containers out of his satchel. But he didn't just pack up his own leftovers, which would be fine. No, he leaned over and started scraping uneaten breadsticks and half-finished pasta off an empty table next to them. That isn't being frugal or eco-conscious. That is a petty crime committed in broad daylight. You are not on a date with a provider. You are on a date with a biological scavenger. 11. Have you ever been a third wheel on your own date? How about a third wheel with your date's ex-wife? A man in New Jersey actually brought his former spouse along to dinner so she could approve of his new romantic interest. He told the poor woman that his ex's opinion still really matters to him. Imagine the silence at that table. Just two women staring at each other, realizing they both made terrible life choices involving the same man. At this point, you have to wonder if these people are just collecting trauma for a memoir. There is no other logical explanation for this level of chaos. 12. There are compliments that make you blush. And then there are admissions of deep, unresolved psychological issues. This guy looked at his date with a beaming, confident grin and said, "You know, you look exactly like my sister." To prove it, he didn't just show a photo. He pulled out his phone, zoomed in on a family portrait, and insisted on a side-by-side comparison. That isn't flirting, my friend. That is a genetic family reunion that nobody asked for. Unless you are auditioning for a very questionable reality show, that is the moment you fake a contagious illness and sprint to your car. Sigmund Freud would have a field day with that one. 13. The night was winding down, and instead of going for a handshake or a hug, this guy grabbed her hand and refused to let go. He started tracing the lines on her palm, claiming he could read her fortune. His mystic prediction? A future filled with mild financial success and many cats. Buddy, that isn't a psychic reading. That is a creepy HR violation waiting to happen. It takes a special kind of confidence to hold a stranger's hand hostage while predicting they will die alone with a house full of tabbies. 14. An invitation back to his place in San Diego usually suggests the night is going well. In this case, it was a trap. He walked her into his apartment, pointed at a literal mountain of dirty laundry on the sofa, and said, "So, I was hoping you could help me with this." He didn't want a romantic partner. He wanted an unpaid intern with a high tolerance for dirty socks. This wasn't a date. It was a desperate attempt to outsource his domestic chores. If someone tries to turn a first date into a laundry service, leave the detergent and run. 15. Number 101 on the list of things that shouldn't happen but did. The date was genuinely perfect. Great conversation, real chemistry, actual sparks flying. At the end of the night, he walks her to her door, gives her a firm, business-like handshake, and hands her a physical copy of his resume. He asked her to pass it along if she knew anyone hiring. This wasn't a romance. It was a networking event disguised as a dinner. She essentially just conducted a job interview for a position she never, ever applied for. 16. It was a casual breakfast date. He ordered a blueberry muffin, which seems safe enough. But then, he didn't unwrap it. He proceeded to bite into the muffin, chewing and swallowing the paper liner along with the pastry. When his date stared at him in absolute horror, he just shrugged and said one word: fiber. I don't care how health conscious you are. If you are eating paper products on a first date, you are not a human. You are a goat in a polo shirt. Do not ask follow-up questions, just pay the bill and flee. 17. They decided to play a board game at a local cafe to break the ice. Bad move. He lost the game. In response, he didn't just get a little salty, he flipped the entire board into the air, sending tiny plastic pieces raining down on the other patrons. That isn't a competitive spirit. That is a full-grown toddler who needs a timeout and a juice box. If a man cannot handle losing a game of Connect 4 without causing a scene, he probably isn't ready to handle a mortgage or a relationship. 18. There is absolutely no shame in living with your parents to save money. But a man in Maine took the concept to a new, vertical level. He proudly announced that he lived in a fully furnished treehouse in his parents' backyard. He claimed it gave him total independence. That is not independence, my friend. That is a mortgage-free birdhouse with Wi-Fi access. It's hard to bring a date home when home requires a rope ladder and a secret password. You're dating Peter Pan, and it's time to grow up. 19. At the end of the date, he reached into his pocket to present her with a gift. It was a homemade coupon book for his own services. It included coupons for things like 1 free car wash and 15 minutes of uninterrupted listening. The arrogance is breathtaking. He didn't give her a gift. He gave her a list of chores and implied that listening to her speak was a service he usually charges for. That is the kind of gift a 6-year-old gives their mother, not something you give a woman you're trying to impress. 20. Dinner for two is romantic. Dinner for two plus a ventriloquist dummy named Slappy is a psychological thriller. This guy didn't just bring the doll, he made the doll order the wine. He made the doll flirt with the waitress. He even had the doll argue about the tip while he sat there smiling silently. If you are competing for attention with a block of painted wood that tells bad jokes, the date is over. You aren't dating a comedian, you're dating a man who needs a wooden prop to have a personality. 21. We all know someone who likes to save a buck, but this guy took frugality to a place where dignity goes to die. He walked into a coffee shop, pulled a crumpled tea bag from his pocket, and asked for a cup of hot water. When the barista charged him 50 cents for the cup, he argued for 10 minutes. He held up the line, red-faced, fighting over 2 quarters while his date tried to dissolve into the floor. That isn't being thrifty. That is the exact reason businesses have to put up passive-aggressive signs near the register. 22. How do you identify a psychopath in the wild? You don't need a psychological evaluation. You just need to watch them eat fruit. This guy picked up a banana, and instead of peeling it from the stem like a civilized human, he pinched it in the middle and ripped it open. It was a visceral, violent snap that turned the fruit into mush. He called it a life hack. No, sir, that isn't a hack found on TikTok. That is the origin story of a supervillain. If he treats a banana with that much disrespect, run before he starts hacking other things. 23. Honesty is usually the best policy, unless your hobby is a felony. A guy in Vermont proudly announced to his date that his main side hustle was kidnapping garden gnomes from neighbors' yards and holding them for ransom. He didn't just say it. He pulled out his phone to show a proof-of-life photo of his latest victim, a gnome named Norman holding today's newspaper. It's a moral dilemma. Do you call the police, or do you ask for a cut of the ransom money? Either way, you're definitely not getting a second date, but you might get an accomplice charge. 24. The date was a masterclass in how to remain single forever. He spilled 2 drinks, insulted the waiter's haircut, and told a 10-minute joke with no punchline. The tension was non-existent. Yet, as he walked her to her car, he stopped, looked her dead in the eyes with unearned confidence, and asked, "So, Are we exclusive now? Exclusive? Brother, the only thing you should be exclusive with is a lifetime ban from this restaurant. It takes a staggering lack of self-awareness to bomb that hard and still expect a contract signature at the end of the night. 25. Walking down the street after dinner, he stopped dead in front of a department store window. He wasn't looking at the clothes. He was introducing his date to a mannequin. He called her Cynthia and told his date with zero irony that Cynthia was the one who always listens to him. That isn't a quirky personality trait. That is a mental health crisis wrapped in a polyester blend. When your competition for his affection is a piece of fiberglass that can't talk back, you know the bar is set dangerously low. That's not a love triangle. It's a cry for help. 26. His dating profile said he was a pilot, and he spent the entire dinner talking about the freedom of the skies. She was impressed. That is, until she saw him the next weekend in the town square. He wasn't flying a Boeing 747. He was wearing white face paint and a striped shirt, trapped inside an invisible box. He was a street mime. Technically, he works with air, so maybe he didn't lie, but the deception is unforgivable. His career didn't just have a layover, it was permanently grounded. You can't even argue with him about it because, well, he won't talk. 27. He greeted her with a posh British accent, sounding like he was fourth in line for the throne. It was charming, until the appetizers arrived and he slipped into Australian. By dessert, he sounded like a cowboy from Texas. When she asked him where he was actually from, he panicked and answered in a bad Dracula voice. He wasn't a world traveler. He was just a guy with an identity crisis and too much time watching YouTube tutorials. Dating him would require subtitles and a lot of patience. 28. We all have special talents, but some should remain hidden deep in the vault until at least the 10th anniversary. This gentleman decided the middle of a quiet, upscale wine bar was the perfect place to demonstrate his ability to burp the entire alphabet. He started strong with a resounding A, but by the time he proudly reached the letter M, he realized his audience of one had vanished. She didn't excuse herself to the restroom. She ghosted him in real time. He probably finished the rest of the alphabet alone, which is exactly how he should spend his evenings. 29. Picture a full-grown man in a blazer, tears genuinely streaming down his face in a nice bistro. Is it a breakup? A tragic family event? No. The waiter informed him they were out of Heinz ketchup and only had the house brand. He wept as if attending the funeral for a beloved sauce. He couldn't cope with the concept of generic condiments. Sir, this is a first date, not a condiment intervention. If his emotional stability hinges on the label of a tomato-based product, he is not ready for the hardships of actual human relationships. 30. Everything was going well until he started referring to himself in the third person. Kevin doesn't like spinach. Kevin is having a great time. It wasn't a joke. He narrated his own life like he was the subject of a low-budget documentary. It is impossible to build intimacy with a guy who talks like a disgruntled athlete giving a post-game interview. You just want to grab him and shake him, but you know Kevin would just get upset. Kevin is going home alone tonight. 31. Some dates are bad, others are literal financial traps. For one guy in Utah, a coffee date turned into a boardroom nightmare. He thought they were hitting it off, but then she pulled out a laptop and launched into a 20-slide PowerPoint presentation on essential oils. She wasn't flirting, she was recruiting. She even offered him a special romantic partner discount to join her downline. How much do you have to hate someone to pitch them a pyramid scheme over a latte? That's not love, that's multi-level marketing aggression. 32. You're on a nice drive, the music is playing, and he says, I just need to make a quick stop. Innocent enough. He runs into a convenience store. 2 minutes later, he sprints out carrying 2 cases of beer he definitely didn't pay for, jumps in the car, and screams, "Go, go, go!" at you. Congratulations, you are no longer just a date. You are an accessory to a crime and a getaway driver. It brings a whole new meaning to adventure seeking. First date or felony charge? You decide. 33. Taking a date to a college football game is usually a touchdown. The atmosphere is great, the energy is high. That is, until your date picks a fight with the team mascot. A full-blown shoving match erupted because the guy in the giant foam bird costume high-fived his date. The boyfriend took it as a personal insult. That isn't protecting her honor. That is a grown man losing a fist fight to a Muppet in front of 40,000 people. If your masculinity is threatened by a polyester bird, you have bigger problems than the scoreboard. 34. Ever seen an Oscar-worthy performance over a plate of linguine? One woman in Seattle did when her date faked a catastrophic shellfish allergy after one bite. He gasped. He clutched his throat. He caused a scene. The terrified manager comped the entire meal instantly. The second they were on the sidewalk, he was miraculously cured, bragging, "Works every time." The only thing this guy was actually allergic to was opening his wallet. It's hard to build a foundation of trust when your relationship starts with medical fraud and stolen pasta. 35. It takes a special kind of bravery or stupidity to bring outside food into a fine dining establishment. But this guy didn't just sneak in a candy bar. He sat down at a white tablecloth restaurant, ignored the menu, and unwrapped a half-eaten sandwich he found baking in his car from the day before. He claimed he didn't want it to go to waste. Sir, that sandwich is a biological weapon, not a snack. That isn't being frugal. That is a health code violation with a reservation. If he values a soggy, sun-baked sub over a fresh meal, imagine what else he's hoarding in that car. 36. Nothing signals, "I am a stable, functioning adult," quite like a full-body fleece unicorn onesie. Everything was going fine until an hour into the date when this guy in Maryland stood up and said, "I'm just going to get a little more comfortable." He returned from the bathroom wearing a horn, a pink mane, and a rainbow tail. He sat back down like nothing happened. That isn't getting comfortable, pal. That is a one-man slumber party, and your date is the confused hostage. If you need a tale to relax, stay home and watch cartoons alone. 37. Getting a parking ticket is annoying, sure, but for most of us it doesn't trigger a civil rights movement. When this guy saw the ticket on his windshield, he didn't curse or rip it up. He physically laid down on the pavement in front of his car, arms crossed, refusing to move until the meter maid retracted the fine. This wasn't a noble protest against tyranny. It was a 2-year-old's strategy trapped in a 30-year-old's body. There is nothing less attractive than a grown man throwing a tantrum on dirty asphalt over a $20 fine. 38. Imagine you are trying to have a nice conversation, but your date keeps glancing at his phone and muttering to himself. Annoying, right? Now imagine he is holding the phone up and live streaming your face to his 12 followers. A guy in Austin actually had the internet rating his date's conversation skills in real time. He even had the sheer audacity to ask her, "Hey, the chat is bored, can you do something funny?" Yeah, she did something hilarious. She left. You aren't dating a content creator. You're dating a narcissist with a data plan. 39. Some guys bring flowers to a first date, others bring chocolates. This gentleman in Pennsylvania decided to bring a taxidermied raccoon. He didn't leave it in the car either. He placed the stiff, glassy-eyed creature right on the table between the salt and pepper and introduced it as Rocky. That isn't a cute quirk or a conversation starter. That is a cry for help. Rocky isn't a +1, my friend. He is a +none. If your wingman is dead and stuffed with sawdust, you are destined to remain single forever. 40. The date was cruising along perfectly, heading toward a nice, peaceful walk in the botanical gardens. Then, a Prius tapped the brakes in front of them. Instantly, her charming, soft-spoken companion transformed into a screaming rage monster. He was pounding the steering wheel, veins bulging from his neck, looking like he was auditioning for a villain role in Mad Max. He was screaming insults at a grandmother going the speed limit. All that fury trapped inside a beige, sensible sedan is truly terrifying. If a minor traffic inconvenience turns him into the Hulk, imagine what happens when you burn the toast. Tuck and roll, lady. Tuck and roll. 41. Picture a date that suddenly veers into a musical nightmare. A guy in Tennessee dragged his date to a bar, jumped on stage, and dedicated a song to her. It wasn't a romantic ballad. He belted out a painfully off-key, ear-bleeding rendition of "You've Lost That Lovin' Feelin'," directed right at her face. The irony was thicker than the smoke in the room. He didn't just lose that loving feeling. Truth be told, he never even had a deposit on it. Public humiliation is not a love language, no matter what he thinks. 42. The meal is over, the check arrives, and the guy wants to look like a big shot. He coolly pulls out a crisp $100 bill. But something is wrong. It feels like Monopoly money. The waiter holds it up to the light, sighs, and looks at him with pure pity. It was very obviously fake. He wasn't just trying to pay for dinner, he was casually committing a low-stakes federal crime in front of a witness. Nothing ruins the romantic mood quite like the threat of a Secret Service investigation before dessert. 43. How cheap can a first date get before it becomes a social experiment? A fully grown man in Virginia set a new record. After studying the menu at a nice bistro for 10 minutes, he looked the waiter in the eye and confidently ordered chicken fingers and applesauce from the kids' menu. He wasn't being ironic, he wasn't sick. He just really wanted that $7 discount and a coloring mat. If your date needs a crayon to get through dinner, you aren't looking for a partner. You're looking for a babysitter. 44. We've all seen bold fashion choices, but a guy in Florida brought a full-size samurai sword to dinner. He didn't check it at the coat room. He propped it up on the empty chair next to him, just in case. In case of what? A ninja ambush at the Olive Garden? If your date requires a weapon from feudal Japan to feel safe eating breadsticks, just pay the check and teleport out of there before he challenges the waiter to a duel. 45. You know what's significantly creepier than your date's mom showing up at the table? Your date's mom hiding in the landscaping outside. A woman caught a glint of light and realized her date's mother was crouched in the bushes, watching them through a pair of high-powered binoculars. When confronted, he shrugged and called her protective. No, buddy, that isn't a mother. That is a low-budget surveillance operation. If you need a perimeter check from your mom to eat pasta, you are not ready to leave the nest. 46. A woman decided that her designer handbag was the perfect travel container for her pet ferret, Mr. Fuzzbutt. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Midway through the meal, the creature escaped the purse and launched itself onto the passing dessert cart like a tiny furry missile of chaos. It wasn't a cute ratatouille moment. It was a health code disaster. The date didn't end with a kiss. It ended with the terrified manager chasing a sugar-coated weasel around the dining room with a shrimp net while customers screamed. Unless you are dating a zookeeper, live animals should generally not be the third wheel at a romantic dinner. 47. I never go anywhere without this, she declared at a high-end French restaurant. She reached into her bag and pulled out a bottle of ghost pepper hot sauce the size of a fire extinguisher. She didn't add a dash. She completely drowned her delicate $40 meal in red sludge. The chef looked out from the kitchen in absolute horror. That isn't adding flavor or spicing things up. That is committing a culinary hate crime against your own taste buds. Why even go to a nice restaurant if you just want to eat liquid fire? 48. Everyone has a hobby. Some people knit scarves, some collect vintage coins. A guy in Oregon collects human teeth. The check came and he whipped out his wallet. But instead of a Visa card, he pulled out a discolored molar he claimed belonged to a distant relative and tried to show it off to the waitress. He was genuinely proud of it, holding it up like a rare diamond. That isn't a fun show and tell moment to break the ice. That is Exhibit A in a future serial killer trial. If a man has more loose teeth in his pocket than in his mouth, run for the hills immediately. 49. Some eating habits are just quirky, but others are war crimes against food. A woman in Tennessee watched in fascination and horror as her date dismantled his burger with surgical precision. He didn't take a bite. He separated the bun, the lettuce, the tomato, and the patty, and ate each component individually. He peeled it apart like he was defusing a bomb that would explode if the pickles touched the cheese. That isn't dining, that is a culinary autopsy. Just eat the sandwich, weirdo. If this didn't make you grateful for your solitude, nothing will. Hit that like button if you survived the cringe, and smash subscribe so you don't miss the next disaster. Now, I want the truth in the comments. What is the absolute worst thing you have ever done on a date? Don't blame the other person. Confess your sins, we're all judging you anyway. Spill the dirt.